go to a doctor and the doctor combines his or her practical knowledge with the knowledge of an AI, that is much more like practical, I feel, because you are combining your practical knowledge, like which you have gained over the years, with the knowledge of an AI. So it's not just only one siloed knowledge. It's like practical knowledge that you gained over the years after seeing multiple patients, and then you're combining that knowledge with the knowledge for an like LLM output. So I think that is much more like uh, trustworthy, I feel, rather than just trusting an AI.
And Chantel, are you comfortable with this intimacy of the relationship between machine and human and where we're finding it today here in 2026?
Not at all. Not at all. Because I think it's outsourcing our own wisdom. And, if I look at this panel, we are fortunate women, but let's not forget the woman in the street. Let's not forget the woman who feels like she doesn't have options, who feels like she can't afford to go to a doctor and she's forced to let ChatGPT diagnose, right? And this is what's happening. What about if we strengthen that woman holistically and we give her access to the wisdom that she already has access to deep within her? What about if we strengthen that as opposed to strengthen her ties to the machine? Just a thought.
It's very interesting
It's
that
very interesting.
the relationship between the patient and the doctor today still has more work to be done, still has more trek to give, still has more access to give. Some people don't enjoy the experiences of what Dr. Garcia talked about, of what she's experiencing throughout her tour in Asia now, with the decency that's placed in these specific countries and the lack of therein in so many other different cities around the world. I sit there and think about that, Chantal. All of a sudden, people haven't even began to appreciate the relationship with the doctor with the heartbeat. And now we may be propagated to be able to have a relationship with the doctor without one. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Garcia, as you find yourself through the vestiges of Southeast Asia and throughout these very beautiful lands that many of us have never been to and traveled to, but you find yourself there? And are you a bit surprised with the level of decency compared to that which you may not have experienced or that you see other people not experiencing in this very country here in the great state or the great country of the United
Absolutely.
States?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the dentist that I went to see here, that they only charge $15 for a full teeth cleaning with x-rays, and another $15 for a filling. And I said, my goodness. And the bedside manners, as we call it back in those old days, the professionalism and the care and the follow-up. And I said, but that's because they're still focused on patient care relationships. And that is a huge difference that I've seen in Southeast Asian countries. Despite even the modern day technology, it boiled down to one-on-one relationships. And I'm going to take it to what is the current mental health crisis, especially facing our young generations. I know that Christopher and I had conversations about this because that's one of the things that I'm addressing at different universities right now is this. 70% of Gen Z would rather have a committed relationship with AI than humans. That doesn't even touch on any medical, but that is what the Gen Zs are now wanting, right? And mental health crisis is now even on the rise. We're not even talking about what we're talking about today. That is another wave or tsunami of what is about to hit. The disconnection of relationships, the disconnection of communication, the disconnection of family foundations. It is not the same. In fact, in my recent talk with the University of Technology in Cambodia, just about a week and a half ago, and I covered about 8 classes in 2 days, I've asked the students, how many of you have best friends? And in an average class size of 60, only 2 people raised their hand. And I remember in my high school in Unit 2, yes, Chantel, right, 2 people. And I said, okay, how many of you have close friends? Nobody raised their hands. These are the Gen Zs. And I said, how many of you still have parents? And they just kind of started laughing and raised their hand. But this is becoming more and more epidemic as we speak. So when I see, yes, the older generation, let's say millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, when we do go to the clinics here, even in Southeast Asia, it's still that patient care. And that's what people, you've got very low cost medical, checkups and the care, but it's the relationships that's honored in the different countries here in Asia. But then on the other side, as technology grows, right, we have the other epidemic that's going to be a pandemic when it hits the mental health crisis, because the new generation do not have a relationship with each other anymore. So this is, more and more, there's work to be done, ladies, in so many sectors, that this is the true calling for impactful collaboration. True collaboration, not competition anymore. There's no choose your lane anymore, especially with what's about to happen in the next 2 years. We need to truly put our gifts together. We really need to put our calling together and work in teams. Because if AI is, it's evolving as we speak, then humans, we were still given our own digital imprint that can never be duplicated, called our fingerprint in our brains, right? Is that this is now the call for all women in all sectors to really find each other, form groups of, basically be solutions driven, and form those groups. This is no longer the motivational, inspirational era.
We thank you, Dr. Garcia, for your words of expression and your admonishment. I sit here under the sound of each of your voices today at this 41st Global Summit, Dr. Good. I sit here and listen to these words, Chantal. I listen to these expressions, Anisha. And Dr. Good, I sit here and listen at this 41st Global Summit. You can imagine we've had thousands of speakers. We've had hundreds of roundtables and firesides and talks. And I think about the immensity and the magnitude of what Dr. Garcia just told us about the ratio and the comparison of the relationship between human and machine. And I sit here and I say to myself, have we already become too close to these machines? And they're at their lowliest state of what they are today, and there'll be nothing as we know them by this time next year, let alone within months as we look at the rapid progress that we're seeing these machines. I sit here and think about that, but what I also am led to appreciation of many things of what Dr. Garcia said, including the need for us to arrive together. We shouldn't have to wait for nonprofit dollars and NGOs to be able to take up the chalice and to take up the mantle of impact when it comes to what these technologies are doing to us. Heart to heart, group to group, as Dr. Good has already expressed, that there's a group of women that are sitting here studying, and the practitioners when it comes to women's breast, if you will, and the exploration therein, and they're sitting here. And I don't think that they needed a nonprofit budget and they needed some big appetite of desire for someone to fund an initiative, as opposed to using what their God-given talents were, if you will, to go and do something about it. I sit here and think about the need for community development, which is one of our GatherVerse standards. And I just don't think that we have considered the enormity of the challenge that has arisen. And the thing is, this is so persistent of a technology. I believe that once many people understand the magnitude of which is upon us, in many ways, Dr. Good, to make change, I do believe that it will be too late. If there's never been more of an important time for these type of discussions, then I don't know when. Dr. Good, can you give us more on that, of the opportunity of what we stand to face when those women that you know and that you're part of get together and sit there and huddle over, looking and bearing over paper an expression for solution?
Two thoughts. First of all, the seasons of the life of women that Anisha brought up, we're all in different seasons. And different seasons have different challenges and different ways of working with our bodies, etc. What we're facing, not only with the Gen Zs, is the other end of that spectrum. We have the biggest aging population that we've ever seen in America, and it is coming fast. We have so many more people who are so ill, and I'm not just talking about dementia and all the strokes and high blood pressure and diabetes, that our healthcare system is going to be so overloaded that we've got coming and we've got people going. I work in geropsych. One day a week, I volunteer in nursing homes and I do assessments for Medicaid. So I get to see the progression of when I first meet someone to a year later, what happens when they're put in a nursing home, they're confined to a wheelchair, they have a little socialization, they're eating that food, and I mean that food that has little, I mean, it has some nutrition, but it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look nice. All the things that degrade, and I talk about the dignity of care and the dignity of life. There are CNAs, there are aides who've been doing this job for 25 years, and they love their patients. They love them, but there's only so much you can do. So what is going to happen when we reach? We're getting ready to reach this apex that's going to go like that. We've got about 7 to 10 years before we reach that point when Gen Z no longer has relationships and our adult population are all needing incredible amount of health care. I'm not sure if our HHS secretary at 71 can save us, but he's trying his best. He's trying to get us to eat better. He's trying to get us to exercise. He's trying to get us to do those things. How can technology, the emergent technology, how can it help us with, first of all, learning about self-care, education? We've got great apps. Christopher Brown, we've got the Peace app, PeaceVerse, we've got that. We can be learning self-care. We've got great apps for that. But it takes self-determination to turn the machine on and actually interact with it and say, yes, I need to practice self-care. Yes, I need to do that. And all that comes from inside, from the core, from the intuition. And just like Chantel says, how do we reach those women that are intersectional, that are of color, that have never had good health care? They've never seen good health care modeled. Their parents have never had it. They're eating the most bare minimum. They're doing drive-throughs. Their whole world is fast food. How are you going to help those women with emergent technology? How are you going to get them to realize that health is the only thing that we can help preserve to have a good, long, vital life? Here we are.
I sit here and think about, and thank you for sharing that, Dr. Good and Anisha. I sit here and think about the necessity for more human innovators. Is this the hour for such time? Is this the hour where we need to see more human innovation and more human impact of scale, less than machines? I think we're in desperate need of a renaissance, if you will. I'll stray away from the word revolution, but of a renaissance of innovators that are building and doing heartfelt work, heartfelt innovation, entrepreneurs that see the other ethical imbalance and to have a need to innovate, not from a place of driven high profit, which it's fine to raise and drive capital. I work with such entrepreneurs every day, but more work towards the heart that may not be as financially rewarding, but can be far more sustaining. Are we heading into that necessity of time, Anisha, from what you're looking at when it comes to innovation and those of us that work and build and work with these machines? Is this needed now?
It is needed, but also like as everyone mentioned that along with the human interception, I think there's a need to understand people better, like understand the relationships. Like also another aspect that I'd like to touch upon is like the mental health, because in today's world I think mental health also affects physical health. Like when you are down mentally, you are not in a good mental place, it affects your physical health, and it might lead to a lot of like binge eating, and it might lead to like a lot of eating disorders. So I think those factors need to be taken into account when it comes to human innovation, and not just focus on like some created models, right? Like certain, for example, people of color, like women of color, and there's a lot of cultural stereotypes. Like I am from India, and where I come from, there's a lot of cultural stereotypes across like women's health, because uh, a lot of the times women are not made to speak up. They don't really speak up. For example, when you actually go through after a person gives birth, you go through postpartum, and certain times postpartum depression causes a lot of mental health issues and physical health issues as well. And where I am from, it's not like culturally acceptable to actually speak about mental health issues. But I would say that with a lot of AI and everything, it is changing, like the society is changing there as well. As per Western culture, it is actually much more advancing right now. But I would say a lot of innovation is still important, and a lot of focus has
Okay.
comes to mental health, physical health, and also other innovations in terms of complete healthcare, I'd say.
Thank you, Anisha, for addressing that. Mental health has been so huge with GatherVerse. It was really our second focus summit that we had. I remember when we started GatherVerse, we went with over 10,000 attendees, had 2 months to put together what is now GatherVerse. And the very next summit, I thought it prudent to be able to have a mental wellness summit where other people thought that we should talk more about technology. And I think about the relationship and the impact of technology, as so many people have expressed, each of you have expressed. And I just realized then, as we realize now, the impact that technology, as our next roundtable will heavily get into, the impact of technology and has on our mental wellness, our physiology, our physical health, and even our spiritual health, at least from Mindland's perspective. Chantel, we think about this, and we're going to end with each of you giving a very brief moment, and then we have another roundtable to ascend to. I sit here and think about, coming back to what we talked about, that we must know our own selves. And when we find this exploration of coming to better understand our own bodies, our own health, will that lead us to an opportunity to relate to one another even better? What are the benefits of that, Chantal? Let's leave it to the benefits of that.
Ultimately, Christopher, I think we've got to, this interplay with human and technology is very much an outsourcing of responsibility. And for me, it's a rallying call to take personal responsibility once again. We are human. We will always be human, and human created the machine. Let's not forget that. We are the masters. So when it comes to taking responsibility for our health, for our lives, for our well-being, for everything that we do in this life,
Sure.
I like to use a ball analogy, right? So we all talk about how we juggle all these balls, and we've got all these balls up in the air at any given time. The question is it a rubber ball or is it a glass ball? Your health is a glass ball. Your work is a rubber ball. It can bounce back. But your health, if you drop it, can it bounce back? That is the priority. That is the question we've got to ask ourselves as women. Are we juggling with glass balls? And how do we start shifting our priorities?
Thank you very much, Chantel, for those enlightening and deep heartening words. Dr. Garcia, in our final closing seconds that we have here, and then Dr. Good, and then we'll close it with you, Dr. Anisha. Dr. Garcia, how do we bring more decency to this world? And how do you take what you're experiencing in Asia right now and bring that to the world?
Thank you for that beautiful question, Christopher. As we come into close, I always say this on global stages, no matter what part of the continent God throws me in at this point. As women, we birth nations, women raise nations, and women move nations. There's no amount of technology that can duplicate the very DNA that births and raises children, and also the courage we all have. Forget about multitasking, the multi responsibilities that a woman can juggle, AI cannot compete with, especially when you put the human emotion and relationship as our core, because this is where we thrive in as women. It's
Sure.
in our inner relationships, interrelationships, and outer relationships. That is what makes us all successful. So do not forget the humanity portion of any different handling, that if we can just go back to the very core of Corinthians, what is love? Love is kind, love is patient, and just put your name there. Is Christopher loving? Is Christopher patient? Is he kind? Does he not boast? If we go back to the very essence of that, we're going to continue to thrive. and we can get the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas and the Gen Betas and all the ABCs that follows after that, as long as we do not lose our own value that God inherently had put on us.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. We're so very happy and very joyous, rather, to share stage with you today. And in the final closing seconds here, Dr. Good, we talked about so much. We talked about machines. We talked about interhealth. We've talked about decency. We've talked about engineering and scale. With all the culmination of that, from your lens perspective of being a practitioner for decades, what is it that you would have us to close out with for these brief moments?
I want to pick up on you talking about the impact of women having babies within their bodies, of growing a human. Within that girl baby are ovaries, are seeds. That girl baby, when she's born, those seeds will become more babies, both girl and boy. They all carry them within them. So each mother carries almost their grandchildren within their bodies. And when we start to think about that, we are the only creatures that can create humanity in that way, that we are so connected hormonally to our environment. Just the intuition that women have, the spider sense that we have, the things that Chantel has been talking about, how we are so connected to our environment, both inside and outside, that we can actually become teachers. We can teach AI what it means to be human. And AI is going to have to learn. It's learning now.
Sure.
But we want them to be taught what it means to be human by good humans, by people who have the best intentions, by people who want everyone to win and everyone to succeed. And how do we gather that up so that the bad actors don't get to hop in? So good intentions. God did not give us the spirit of fear, but the spirit of power, love, and a sound mind.
Thank you for sharing these intimate expressions and professional expressions, Dr. Good. We're very thankful for them. And in closing here, Anisha, we talked about that journey of that embryonic, that fetal, that baby, that child coming forth, and you help bring that to surface. We talk about this journey to where we find all of ourselves in adulthood, if you will. When we look at this, and we're here in 2026, we're still surviving. What do you believe in your heart as an engineer, with everything that you're doing, of the small contribution that Anisha will make based on what you've heard today? What do you believe your next steps should be and that you hope for to be when it comes to contributing towards this?
As I mentioned, one of the things that I wanted to do and want to do still, like, is bring awareness about like how a woman's body and mind is different from a man's body, and like the physiology in general is very different from a man. So I think that has to be like made aware in the society, that how a man thinks versus a woman thinks, and like in terms of like physical development as well, like as we go through the stages, like as I think Dr. Good and Dr. Garcia mentioned, there's a lot of like women hold that power, and like women are born with the eggs, right? And it's like grandmothers hold that, like you actually are born with those. So I think that has to be made aware, that how much power you actually hold and how much your body changes from one stage to another stage. uh, I would like to make a lot of people aware of that, because not a lot of people are aware. I feel like a lot of things are lacking. And when it comes to technology, you can actually integrate that into technology, like maybe build something which will create more awareness in society. I mean, it's not necessarily like just boast about like what is what, but just an app which can actually you can install on your devices, and it can help you understand a woman's body better, a woman's mind better, and how a woman thinks versus how a man thinks. So I think that is another step I would like to take in the coming future.
Think of you, each of you, leaders, women, in the presence of you, I am yet a student. We've gained so much. Audience, take time to follow them, to join them, not just to see, but to work with, to build with, and to hopefully be inspired by. We're preparing for our next GatherVerse roundtable discussion to go further on top of this well-met foundation that was just laid before us. Thank you, each of you, and farewell. Our gather was well.
Greetings. Welcome to the second roundtable panel, GatherVerse Women's Health Summit 2026. I would first like to appreciate the first panel that really did quite justice to explain the state of women's health, where we are, where does technology come. On this particular panel, we are going to talk about technology in women's health, what helps and what harms. A lot of deep expressions were expressed during the first panel. And for me, this panel is just a continuum. We're going to answer some of their questions, and we're also going to explore further on this subject on technology. But before we go into that, I'd like to welcome my fellow panelists here to introduce themselves, to tell us who they are and why they were inspired to join us. Now, who do I start with? I will start with you, Stephanie. Tell us who you are, what inspired you to join us. And we will be brief because I believe we have a lot to tackle, and then we'll pass the baton on and we'll conclude the introductions with Kim. Stephanie, over to you.
Stephanie Sylvester, co-founder of Avatar Buddy, and I'm part here to just explore different ways of how to use AI upstream to support the medical and industry and amplify women's health.
Amazing. And we're happy to have you once again. It's always a pleasure to be in your presence. Aliyah, this is not your first time. Please tell us who you are and what inspired you to join us today.
Thank you. So my name is Aliyah Gibbs. For my day job, I am an AI talent strategist for a corporation. So I work on upskilling engineers specifically. But what drew me to this panel specifically is I accidentally started a community. And I say accidentally, but it's really funny. I ended up going viral on Threads when I started speaking towards the nervous system, especially in regards to women's health and how stress shows up for high achieving professionals. And I've noticed in my own journey that I was stressed out. Despite being on these platforms and speaking and living my dreams, I was operating in a state of stress. And so now I'm really committed to seeing how I can leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to help prove some of the statistics related to stress and how they can impact women's health specifically. So I'm excited to talk about this conversation today. Thank you.
All right. Aliyah, that is inspiring. We want to learn more about this nervous system and what it really intrigued you to even start it and what AI can do about it. Kat, we want to hear from you. Tell us who you are and what inspired you to join us today.
Hi, everybody. Thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yes, perfectly.
Perfectly. Okay, great. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Kat King. I am an Army veteran, and I am also an XR creator and experimental filmmaker. Essentially, what I do is I just build technology, creative technology to help people manage their psychosis. And I also create immersive experiences to help destigmatize psychosis in general.
All right, Kat, I'm looking forward to learn what psychosis is, by the way. So thank you for joining us. You're in the right place. Tanya, this is not your first time. Bring it on. Tell us who you are. Okay, your mic is your mic, kindly.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi, Lynn. It is great to be here today. I'm Tanya Kellen. I'm founder and CEO of Kellen Content. We have a film and television and digital division where we create films, television series that are impactful for changing people's lives, transformational content. And then we have an XR immersive division where we look at transformational storytelling to enhance greater mental health and well-being outcomes. And right now, we are in the middle of running our first XR innovation micro-credential to train addiction counselors how to bring in XR training tools to help people in their 28-day rehab and also for art therapists.
Wow, that is quite fascinating. We're looking forward to hear that the intersection of XR and the whole well-being. James, over to you. And this is not your first time. You've inspired us with so much of your journey and your stories. But please tell us once again who you are, what inspired you to join us today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me again. I'm really pleased, grateful to be here. So my name is James Welniak, and I am the Director of Mindfulness and Focus with Cup Advisory. It's a new boutique consulting firm that's all about the self and the nervous system. So I've heard that a lot. That's my favorite word. But I'm also more than just a resume. I'm also the male face of screen addiction. Screen addiction recovery, prevention, and transformation, because you're exactly right. It is about the nervous system. And as we move forward in the age of AI, we actually can use technology to heal our nervous system. And that's what my practice is all about. I'm a former consultant, so great to be here. And I'm so proud to be here with empresses, queens, goddesses. So thank you for welcoming me. I appreciate it.
James, it's always an honor to be in your presence. And the nervous system.
No.
It seems we're going to talk a lot about the nervous system here today. But Kim, tell us who you are and what inspired you to join us today.
So hi, everyone. I'm Kim Nelson-Wright. I'm a leadership strategist and founder of K&W Business Advisors, where I work with leaders and organizations to improve how decisions, operations, and people systems actually function inside the complex environments. Much of my work sits at the intersection of leadership, technology, and organizational systems. And I'm especially interested in how emerging technologies are shaping women's health, because women shouldn't just be the users of these tools. We should be the voices shaping how they're designed, governed, and implemented. And I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation today.
Wow, we are honored to have you as well. And just to echo what you said, I'm going to start us with one, just a statement that was made yesterday when Christopher posted about this summit. And he said, more women should be involved in innovation for their bodies. If women are participants in care, they also should be decision makers in care. We're here to really figure out, are they decision makers? Where are we so far? And what is the role of technology? And my first question would go to you, Kim, and anyone can chime in as well. A lot of concerns were raised, and I still believe our audience have some questions that are raising about technology. But let's look at the positive side. I'd like starting with the positive side. Why is technology genuinely improving women's health outcomes? Kim, over to you.
Sure. So I think, technology is making the biggest difference where it expands access to care. So telehealth, mental health platforms, and remote monitoring tools, they're all helping women get the support faster, especially in communities where access to providers is historically limited, right? So it's helping women track their patterns in their bodies and advocate for themselves in clinical settings. that haven't always taken women's concerns seriously, especially minority and marginalized communities. So where technology works best is when it supports the clinician and the care relationships, but doesn't try to replace them. Technology should help the women feel more informed, more protected, and more supported, definitely not surveilled or anxious or more extractable. So I think we're doing some great things with the technology, but there is a lot of work to be done.
Yes, I agree. Before we even go to the surveillance and data privacy and being replaced, let's just scratch the layer of the benefits of technology in women's health. Who wants to chime in on that as well? Tanya, I see you. Bring it on, bring it on.
Well, I can chime in the remote access. We're working with a number of remote access locations, our 2 locations right now, with unique Maison Pelado, a foundation that is in a remote area. And there's another one called Les Sentiers de Nouveau Jour. So we work across English and French markets, and we're bringing this across North America. What we see is there's a lot of disconnect with building platforms that can provide treatment and care to women, and women generally don't have access. They're always caregivers at home, often with babies. So they're the ones that are having to stay at home, taking the brunt of the stress, having to have the job and come home and take care of families. So they are at a higher level of dealing with stress and anxiety that they're not even talking about. So when we're talking about optimal mental health and optimal well-being, we need to have programs that we can get them at home so that they're going to be very engaged. And the addiction crisis that we're dealing with as a result of anxiety with pills and consuming pills or consuming alcohol or, whatever that is, even, with marijuana being legalized, there's some big problems that are coming up, but there aren't enough services to really, get to women at a good price point. So that's why we are going with addiction counselors that can give treatment at a reduced price point. So not only do we have to democratize access to the technology and make it really easy to use and make it more gamified and fun. For most people, if you ask them if they want to stop drinking or taking pills, there's no other alternative for those people. And then they don't see a path to living a natural, healthy, free life. And so to be able to do that, you have to do it in a new, unique way and get them at home. And with that is where we're going with a 28-day cycle. And then once they come out of recovery, so we can get them in any stage they're at. If they want to get into art therapy, that's a much more very, I would say, a very easy way to get people access, or with social workers or with trained frontline care workers. So we have to think about the way that we're going to deliver technology. And it's not just the technology. We have to think about the training. There's new training involved to train all the frontline care workers to use this new technology effectively. So it's a real holistic approach, and women tend to think in a holistic ecosystem. And that's really what, as women designers, we have to design from the ground up to solve our problems. That if you're not a woman having dealt with the problems in an inclusive design manner, where you're talking to the people that are actually the marginalized people that don't have access to internet, that don't have access to more than a phone sometimes, and how are you going to get that to them? So these are the questions that we're answering, because we do have higher level clientele, and then we have people that are really at risk and at need, and so the technology that we're building must be, so that's my 2 cents.
Tanya, I'm thinking about what you just said and the training part of it, and getting people to where they are, whether they have access to even the basic gadget, which is a phone. I find that very brilliant. And this is where I drag the word over to you, James, because I saw you nodding. I know you've dealt with addiction issues. But I just want to hear from you, and what is your lens on this particular subject?
Yeah, thank you. So for improving women's health, I'm not a woman, I'm a cis male. So hopefully that's obvious. But what I would say is that when you talk about the mind, the body, and the spirit, And so when you talk about when I go out and I see a young mother that's got 2 kids struggling and she has her phone and she's clearly distracted. And so when technology can actually reduce down these distractions, actually help you organize your life better, actually give them access to more information around maybe there's something going on within your community and in your neighbor, and also building self-esteem. And so technology isn't all bad. And so there's actually great free methods and tools even out on YouTube that can teach you how to calm your nervous system on the go anywhere, and also can teach you how to really see yourself as a beautiful person and actually have this I am. There's some amazing positive affirmations out there that really it sounds so goofy to do, but I've been doing it for a year. And I heard on my morning ritual, and I have a female friend that does this too. It says, I am beautiful and I can look at myself in the mirror. I can look at myself in the mirror. That is when technology is serving you, is that when you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am beautiful as I am. And that is such an important piece to me. And because women have been such an important aspect of my life. My mother is no longer living. I was a child of ADD. I have a hyperactivity. I still am. I call it my inner rabbit. And so when you talk about addiction and you talk about neurodivergency and ADHD and ADD, those are sensitivities. And so we also have women with children with these, and they're not negatives. They're actually a superpower. And so you can actually teach yourself, but this is all going back to the nervous system and using technology to teach people about the nervous system, to tell them that, hey, every year, your attention span is 23 minutes. You've been on this device for an hour. On this device for an hour, girl. Hey, but it doesn't mean when you take a break that you are listening to something else, your focus and your attention still on that. No, you need to learn how to just come back in yourself for 10 minutes. And people don't know how to do that. So then that's really how I see technology can help improve women, because it helped improve my life and my clients.
Yes, James, thank you for your kind words, or even sharing the experience you've learned from your mom, and the things you have seen with your colleagues, standing on the mirror and saying, I am beautiful the way I am. Those are the things we even need to tell the younger girls who are still coming up and they're growing up in the age of internet. But let me just digress a little bit. Let's go to the other side, of the coin. Let's flip it. And I'm coming to you, Aliyah, Kat, and Stephanie. Where is technology becoming a disadvantage and failing to improve women's health outcomes? Aliyah, your thoughts, please. Your mic, kindly.
Yes.
All right.
What
Aliyah. Yeah, kindly. Yeah, it's Aliyah. Your mic, please, Aliyah. All right. As she prepares, maybe we can come back to you, Stephanie. Kindly go. Stephanie, and then Aliyah.
So what I notice is that when we're building out solutions and when we're designing solutions for women's health, rarely are women in the room being part of the conversation. And if they are, it's one or two women with very limited perspective. So I'll just put out there, I'm of the age that I'm now going through menopause. So when I was younger, if I'm in a room and we're designing a medical solution, I have no concept of what a menopause is. So I would not even think or conceive of including that. Now that I'm going through menopause, I am now wanting to make sure that that is front and center. So I think that as we're building out these solutions, looking at who should be in the room. And one of the things that I have found very, 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 very successful is having the community and the end users be part of the entire development process. So you start off with gathering requirements or writing user stories or whichever methodology you're using. They're at the table helping you write these documents, being trained on how to write them in a way that the developers can understand. And then they're at the table when you're designing the solution to provide input. and then they're back at the table when you're ready to start testing, starting doing alpha tests, beta tests, and they're also at the table when you're doing the pilot in production, and then moving onwards. So by having a strategy like that, we can actually reduce some of the disadvantages that are coming up when we talk about improvements in women's health, and developing technology to improve women's health outcome. The second part of that is accessibility. So you will see that certain people, depending on the quality of their insurance, can get access to certain healthcare solutions that people with other health insurance don't have. And then obviously, when you're talking technology, the technologist wants to get compensated for the time, the energy, and costs of building out that solution. And so I believe that technology should be processed the same way that you're processing other medication, other doctor visits, and not just if you have a rich insurance policy, you get to have these access to these technology. And if you don't have a rich insurance policy, then you're at the mercy of your health insurance, and you have to wait until you're in dire condition before it's getting approved. So
Yeah.
those are my ideas about how technology becomes a disadvantage. And even as we're making advances, we're still not getting it to the people that need to get access to these solutions.
Stephanie, I'm listening to you, and there's something that really resonates quite well when you talk about users being at every process, from the first step to the deployment. I think that is not something to request for. That is something that should be there in every step of innovation. And, I'm coming back to you, Aliyah. What is your take on this particular subject?
Yes, so my take is more so in regards to how social media specifically is, well, it can be a disadvantage depending on how you use it. I mean, it can cause people to compare themselves to other people. You can get caught up into the likes on social media to where, if a post only got 20 likes, now you're struggling with your self-worth. And then just a lot of access to a lot of different things now with social media. There's so many things that we just shouldn't see that are normalized on social media. I mean, if something harmful happened on the street, if there was a camera, you can just be regularly scrolling, and then now you might have seen somebody, get in a really bad accident, a very graphic image. So it's just so much coming at us. I think with the amount of notifications that a person can have on your cellular device can be overwhelming. And then when we talk about every application has a notification, I think it can just cause people to feel overwhelmed ultimately with like decision fatigue, because there's life outside of a phone, right? But when you have a million notifications on your phone, you can just get sucked up into your cell phone. And so I think a lot of people are addicted to their phones, like we stated earlier, and it's causing us to disconnect from people in the real world. So it's like we're all connected virtually, but people are lacking the depth and relationships that they crave. And it's because the real intimacy is in in-person communities and environments. And so because of technology, I think we are so disconnected from each other now. And yeah.
All right. Aliyah, you bring out a very thought-provoking perspective here when you said we're too bombarded with a lot of information. I don't think our minds were prepared, or they had the capacity to receive or take in all this information that keeps coming, and it doesn't stop. And I know James has told us about how to recover from screen addiction, and perhaps I'll bring him later on and tell us more about that. But it's a concern. And when we have women's health applications, and you now have an application that always notifies you every time your health, this is how your cycles are, there's just too much information that is coming in. And I'm yet to learn more on how to really choose what to prioritize and what not to, especially for the younger people who don't have that decision making capacity. But before we go to that, Kat King, I'm very curious to find out what you have to add on this.
Sure, just want to make sure you can hear me. Oh, I have a little echo here. All right. Just mute myself.
Kat?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, but you're a
Okay,
little
great.
bit lowly, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay, no worries. Well, yeah, no, I'm coming from this place of, I had an Army veteran. I suffer
Okay,
from
Kat, we are
mental.
struggling to hear your audio. Is it okay if we just adjust it and then we'll come back to you? Meanwhile, I can just go to the other speaker, but we will be back to you after you fix it. Thank you. Kim, I see you on meeting. It's like you have something to say. Please bring it on.
Yeah, I wanted to just add that another disadvantage is when the technology creates the illusion of care without delivering real care. So a polished app isn't the same as good healthcare. More tracking doesn't automatically lead to better outcomes. It just means we have more data that can just be sitting there. And many platforms collect data, send the alerts like we're talking about, and generate engagement, but they leave the women to interpret everything on their own. So, more data does not automatically mean the better care. And technology can increase the anxiety without improving the pathways to care. So it's really not solving the problem. It's just giving more information that may have may give better care or may not.
Absolutely, and that's a very that's a very intriguing thought that you brought there, because it may not bring any assistance. It may not. It's not a guarantee. Tanya, you have something to add. Please say it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with what Kim is saying. A lot of technology is being built that we're seeing that has a promise of delivery or some kind of transformation, but the execution is lacking. So the E for E should be excellence and E for execution. And a lot of money has been poured into so many new technologies and tracking data, but they don't test with the community, which is what we're talking here. They don't test with the end user. So coming from a background of focus testing with real people, which is what we do in film and television, when we design the technology gap, when we design something that's a play interaction on a website or a game for television and kids and co-viewing, it is focus testing with the audience. But when you're designing for technology, on our technology side, often the product leaders or the product designers are building based on avatars, and the avatars and the personas, and those personas are not real people, and they're holding on to their intellectual property as if they're going to lose their, they're clutching their diamonds and their pearls, and they don't want to show it to anybody. So that is the big gap in the way that we're training. And of course, women, when we have a problem, we like talking to everybody. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Will you buy it? Will you want to use it? We call it the toothbrush experience in design. And if you don't want to use it every single day, then it's not going to work for you. And if you don't make it fun and playful, there's going to be a lot of financial pitfalls and missteps with investing in technology. And it's happened across every new wave of technology. So as women designers, we have to really let everybody know loud and clear that we must test with the end user. And it's happened in the D&D where they've designed all kinds of things. It's happened time and time again. So I can't stress more that the biggest disadvantage in who owns the benefits from, the women's health, it's actually going to have to benefit the actual women, and we must keep testing that way. Otherwise, we will have all these missteps. And that's one of the things we do coming from film and television. We take that into the way we design our technology, and we make sure the end user is going to love it, and it's going to create an automatic health outcome for them that is going to increase their life and get them removed from being clinically diagnosed to actually having a really good quality of life in whatever area they're working with.
Definitely, Tanya, and I loved how you coined it, the toothbrush design. I picked that up with me. Kat is back. Please, Kat, bring your thoughts. We're really happy to hear from you. And before you even come in, I also want to give this question to you. Who owns women's health data and who benefits from it the most? Kat, over to you.
I mean, if we're all watching the news, I think we know who owns our data and our information. Big tech does. Our big three here in the United States it's a global and international industry. So we're looking at your Mark Zuckerbergs and your Elon Musk. And this is a man who's got control over, internet and the ability of weapons systems. Like I said before, I'm an Army veteran. So I come at this through the lens of as much as I am hopeful and very inspired by much of the positive technology, we've heard a lot of examples of great strides in technology for women's health in terms of, being able to detect different types of cancers earlier, and that's wonderful. I've even, in terms of my mental health, struggles myself as an Army veteran with PTSD and schizophrenia. Many benefits to technology are coming out for folks like me because I don't have a medication that works for me to stop voices and stop all the hallucinations. Like right now, I still struggle with them now. I do have hope because there are folks out there who are abroad, maybe not in the United States, but out there in the world who are thinking of people like me, the Army veterans with psychosis, the people with PTSD out there in the world. More people, suffer from trauma than we really want to talk about or acknowledge in our society. So I think right now I'm an apocalyptimist right now in terms of technology. I'm very disappointed and worried about the privacy violations we've seen from Meta in terms of these AR glasses. And as somebody who creates with AR, I'm saddened by this because privacy is everything, and we basically sold it all off to these companies. And every time we open up our phone and there's a little flag, little screen comes up on your little screen, your even smaller screen that comes up with a tiny little text that says, this is this and this, and we promise, and we don't, all those little disclaimers, and we just kind of scroll past it now. We've been desensitized to look over and overlook these really heavy, legally heavily jargoned, disclaimers, and we just go, boom, next thing. And we don't realize how much of our information that little by little, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts over the last 25 years for generations who don't know how this technology works under the hood. What's even scarier for me is that even the people who made this technology don't understand how it works under the hood fully anymore. And it's kind of a little bit of a runaway train. So from an ethics perspective, the ship has left the harbor. We are flying by the seat of our pants. Nobody really understands the full length long-term consequences. And so a lot of our discussions come from a place of optimism and a hope for the future, but we're already seeing the adverse effects of how AI is impacting mental health. We've seen the AI psychosis trend. That's what I'm here to talk about right now, because when we talked about Tanya, you made a great point about how there's women out there who are formulating relationships with AI avatars, and there are children who are forming relationships and attachments with systems that aren't alive, aren't conscious, cannot really reciprocate, and cannot form that same type of attachment back. But that does speak to what Kim is saying. There's not accessibility and agency in the world right now. We don't have, women are in the United States are seeing the rolling back of our rights to our agency over our body and our health. So right now I'm talking about AI psychosis because this is a dangerous and worrying trend. You've got something that we don't really fully understand how it's working underneath, and it's already affecting people to the extent that we have a trend for it, and it's called AI psychosis. So you can imagine that somebody who has a full-length schizophrenia disorder, where I live 24 hours a day all the time with this kind of sense of I don't know what is real, that's where we get into what is psychosis. Well, psychosis is a state where the brain's ability to determine, to discern what is real, what is an internal experience from what is externally happening to us becomes disrupted. And so people can experience things like voices, sounds that come out of nowhere, delusions, strongly held beliefs that we can't change no matter what new evidence is presented, or even disorganized thinking and perception disturbances, and that can lead to distortions of meaning or threat detection. And as a soldierized human being, we don't talk a lot about how that can really impact what is going on. There's one really famous example in the news a few years ago where a gentleman, I don't remember if he was an Army veteran or not, but he believed that the bowling alley was announcing to the world, was just broadcasting to the world that he was a child, a predator. And he took action and he shot up the bowling alley. So we're talking about the fact that this kind of thing, this disrupted idea of what is real and what is not, that line is being blurred. So as an XR person and as somebody who creates immersive technology, it's important to remember that we're not alone, and this technology needs to consider that if somebody with schizophrenia is being impacted adversely by AR technology or even VR technology, it's happening to people who don't have schizophrenia. That means that our human minds are really vulnerable.
Hold that thought, first of all. Hold that thought, because we're gonna come there, and I see people like James want to jump in the room and maybe add something to that. But Kat, we really respect and we honor the presence of having veterans like you, and every veteran or army or any military person or anyone who is working in the public service, making sure the security of citizens. We really honor you and thank you for your presence, Kat. And just to go deeper with you, James and Aliyah and Kim, what technology privacy risks uniquely affect women? And I know, James, you're not a woman, but you have experiences. Tell us what you've experienced.
I have an opinion. Yeah, I have an opinion. I've met many of my early friends were females, especially as a gay male, as a young male in high school. So I will never forget my gals. But I actually want to go to the prior question, if I can, of who owns women's health data. It should be the freaking woman. No, and that's where the things get blurred. Gets blurred. Yes. It should be the woman, period. Because and then who you're keeping up at night, with alerts is that you're destroying their attention and their focus. They should be focusing on themselves. And that's the thing. It's just like cutting out the noise. So anyways, I could talk about this. So I'll get back to the privacy piece, because I heard something last week that really gets me riled. And when you have boys, and I was in high school, and I went to a Catholic grade school, so I saw some things in the closets that would shock you in the 80s. Anyways, but when a boy can take a picture of a female, a classmate, and create pornography. How is this allowed? How is this? It's even beyond the deep fake. That's when I heard this, and I follow a lot with Jonathan Haidt with the Anxious Generation, and he really is a male voice of what's going on, and that's the thing where privacy. Are you kidding me? And then you, as a young girl, I couldn't even imagine as a teenager what that would be like in school. I can't even. So to me, that's the privacy risk, is when it hits the young girl. And what does she do? And how is this technology allowed to do this?
Yes, that's the question. That's the heaviest question that we all have here. And just to chime in on that, there was a report. I'm here in Nairobi, Kenya. You definitely know Kenya runs so many data annotation companies, and we had people who were working for Meta, and some of the data they were collecting from Ray-Ban glasses and what they were seeing daily, just doing their data annotation and all that regulation and whatever duties they tend to when it comes to reviewing data, and they could express the amount of data that is being captured by these classes is enormous, and people are not aware. And some of them are just very, I wouldn't say them. I wouldn't say it's something you can't tell someone, I saw your data doing this and that, but they were never aware. What if those data just leaks out? Bank accounts, children, what you're doing with your kids, and it's a very saddening time and saddening point to be at. But I just want to hear from you guys. For me, it really intrigues me the kind of things that I saw from those people who were just doing that work for Meta, Tanya and Abby. But let me just start with Abby. Not Abby, Aliyah B. Sorry, Aliyah, please.
Yeah, so I think ultimately what it stemmed from, like what was earlier stated, is these tools as an AI engineer were not created with the end user in mind. And a part of AI ethics is one of the things that they go over is there's a difference between, I forgot the exact term, but the way women approach things versus how men approach technology is different ultimately from an ethics perspective. Women actually care about the end user, they care about nurturing and these concepts. So a lot of that gets missed in technology, right? I mean, ultimately, I think there's like literally like less than 1% of women in AI. So when women aren't even a part of the development of these tools, right? We're ultimately, and anybody that's not a part of the development of the tools face the largest risk, because if you weren't considered in the development of them, then you're going to have the biggest impact. And so as an AI engineer, it's hilarious because there was a therapist talking about people going to ChatGPT for therapy yesterday. And so I was having a discussion in the comments. And so people were saying that these technology companies need to be held accountable. And at first, my take was like, I mean, at the end of the day, the tool is going to generate an output based off the prompt that it's given. So you can't necessarily control what happens. You can give the same prompt to this two different tools and even the same tool and get a different output. However, if they did design these things with the end user in mind, these guardrails could have been put up place up front.
Yes.
Instead of being proactive. But I do know with tech, they're just trying to get it out the door the fastest. And so with that, they don't think about some things that should be literally mitigated in risk mitigation. And so another group that faces the biggest risk is with some of the states where abortions aren't legal and you're using apps like Flow to track stuff, that puts you in a potential risk. Like we said, companies might put out that, they're protecting your data, but in the event that they're not, and you're literally logging your cycle and tracking intercourse, things that you should be able to do on these apps, but then they could be potentially giving that out. Like we never know. What if these systems are flagging if your cycle's late?
Yes.
Right. You never know. And so with that, it puts us at risk. And like I think James said, women should own our data. I should own my cycle tracking on a cycle app. Like it should stay on my device. And so there's definitely conversations that need to be had to protect women in the future.
Yeah, and we're having them there here. I see my timer is really putting me on check, but I want to come to you, Tanya. I see you, Stephanie. I'm also going to come to you, but Tanya, quickly, what do you think about this topic? Your mic, please. Your mic.
Thank you. I keep on forgetting. I think there's a huge risk that the big elephant in the room is when we are not giving women access to their data, they're actually not being able to create wealth with their work and with their data. And so what we want to do is when we're helping people with the technology that we're building, we have to move from an extractive economy, which is what most of these tools have been designed to do, to extract all your information, extract all the value, and extract all the data for somebody else's wealth. So there is no community wealth going back into communities for women. There's nothing. It's completely extractive. So we have to move from a data extractive economy to an abundance economy where that data can be cycled back into communities that need the most care, so that many of these tools are designed only if you can afford them, only if you can afford the subscription rate. And that data is then sold and done whatever, some protections are in place in other parts of the world, but in the US, it is not as protective as it could be. So we must rally to protect our women, because our women give birth to men, to any gender. And if we don't protect women, we are not protecting the health and wealth of our planet and our people.
I agree wholeheartedly. And thank you for even marrying the issue of data with wealth creation, right? I think that's one piece that we need to really, really go deeper into. But our time is really short. And I'm coming to you, Stephanie, Kim, and Kat and James, briefly. But Stephanie, how can more women become builders of health technology? Briefly.
So one of the things that I think that women do is they say, "Oh, this is too complicated. I can't possibly know how to do this." And most of the time, men are building out solutions. They have no clue what they're doing, just guessing. And so if we were to rewrite that narrative and say, "I don't know all the intricacies of how to build a solution, but I know what I know what it's like to live as a woman in this world. I know what health issues that I'm dealing with. I know what health issues my sisters are dealing with, and so I am going to volunteer to be part of the conversation. I'm going to be volunteer to be part of the user groups. I'm going to encourage others to participate and volunteer, and where possible, I'm going to demand that the technology company show who is in different phases of their life cycle and the level of diversity in those different phases of their life cycle. And then where possible, because at the end of the day, we're at a point in our society that unless you have financial implications, nobody pays attention to you. So move to another company. And if you have to use a company who is not respectful of women's rights and women's health, then do it under protest. So say, I'm going to use company X, but know that I'm using it because I have no other choice and I dislike using company X. And live in our advocacy. That is really how we start pushing the needle and enforcing the rules and the respect that we deserve. Otherwise, we're going to continually have things that exploit us and create fear and disruption in our lives. And who knows what will happen? Like, what would the insurance company do with this data about my menstrual cycle, about my the data that they're going to use with the frequency with which I have intercourse? I mean, we have no idea what they're cooking up in the back room when we sign up for these apps. And I'm going to leave you with one other thing. Try to stay away from free apps. You know, we've become so enamored about getting everything for free. If you are not paying for something, then you are the product.
Definitely.
And so then you have no control over what they do with your data.
Yes.
If you're paying for something and you say, my data should not be using these things, and they agree, and then they breach that, then you have legal recourse. But if you don't demand that, and then you say, I'm going to use it for free, then it is a little bit naive to expect that we're going to get a solution for free. It's expensive to build these things, and then have full control over our privacy.
Yeah,
That's
definitely, Stephanie. You know, because of our time, I could go on, and we could even just dig that layer of free things. If something is free,
I just want to add 30 seconds though to what Aaliyah was saying.
Yes, I know, Tanya, but our
just
time,
because Aaliyah said something important that most of the time she's one of the only women in the room, and so did Stephanie. More women need to show up. When I go into those AI rooms and I'm designing and I'm learning from so many of the best people, I just want to inspire any woman that is watching here to be able to say that it's possible to start designing without any information or any knowledge whatsoever. There is so much available online that's free to train, and we're all here to help anybody that's watching that wants to make a change, to help the women's movement so that more women designers are at the forefront designing.
All right, Tanya, our time, and thank you for adding that up. I want to hear from Kim and Kat and James briefly, but Kim, please tell us your final sentiments and what you think overall about this topic.
Okay, so if there's one thing we should prioritize moving forward, it's making sure that technology in women's health is designed to expand care, protect our privacy, and strengthen the trust. When technology does that, it becomes a powerful tool for equity. And when it doesn't, it risks reproducing the same gaps that we have now. And that we've been trying to close for decades. So it's super important. Everything that everyone has said today just brings to light that women need to be funded, right? Women founders need to be funded. Hiring more women in the product and engineering space and recognizing our lived experiences as our expertise, right? So it may not be on paper, but we live this every day.
Definitely. And thank you for bringing out the issue of funding, fund women projects. James, and then Kat will finalize this. James, briefly, because of time.
Yeah, what I would say from women building technology is focus and attention. Focus and attention. Because when you talk about emotions, you'll get the eyes rolled. When you talk about well-being, you'll get the eyes rolled. But when you talk about focus and attention, the bottom line, how much money is lost because of errors, because everyone's freaking distracted, that's when you drop a mic. That's what women can do. Take the emotion out of it, get the business. It's focus and attention in the nervous system.
All right, focus and attention. Kat, conclude this panel with very brief remarks.
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you for the conversation. I think the real question here isn't whether technology belongs in women's health. It absolutely does. The question is who's building it, whose lived experiences shape it, and when the people designing these systems include women and disabled women in particular, especially people like me, veterans with mental illnesses like PTSD and schizophrenia, when we get to, as patients themselves, feed back to these systems, then technology can become a tool for dignity and access, and rather than extraction and exploitation. And that way, technology shouldn't just be more about data than it is about our bodies and our minds. Our minds are our bodies, and so it should be more agency for the people living in them. And at the very last thought I'll say is that technology should just expand human dignity in healthcare, not turn our bodies against us and not turn us against each other in how we approach healthcare moving forward.
Beautifully concluded, Kat. And this was a very fantastic roundtable panel. I know we could have gone on and on. A lot was learned. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Aliyah. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, James. Thank you, Kim. And I would encourage you, our audience, please follow these leaders, support what they're doing. And as for me, I would tell you, come back. Welcome back to GatherVerse. We have more summits coming up. Please come dine with us once again. And over to you, GatherVerse team. Our Gather was well. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Hello and greetings. Welcome to our first Fireside Chat Women's Health Summit 2026. And today I'm very honored to have the one and only Angel from Disruptor DAO. Shout out to Disruptor DAO. And before we begin our Fireside Chat titled Design Health, Identity, Confidence, and Whole Person Wellbeing. Please, Angela, tell us who you are and what really inspired you to join us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, GatherVerse team. Again, I'm Angela Doyne, one of the co-founders of Disruptor DAO. And our mission is centered around mindset, knowledge, wealth, as we are supporting the education and investment of into the Web3 space, into disruptive technologies. And so we've been over the past, 43 years now, we've been educating on what it means to build our mental well-being and our financial fortitude, leveraging disruptive technologies in this new digital age and economy that's being created. And so we give thanks to the GatherVerse team. We've been with you all before and are super excited and honored to be a part of the conversation today.
We're also excited to have you back with us. Shout out again, once again, to Disruptor DAO. You know, a lot has been expressed from the previous panels, and this is where we bring in the topic of identity. Do you think identity has a role to play in shaping the way women approach their health, and how does it do that?
Okay, can you hear me a bit better now, Lynn? Okay,
Yes.
Awesome. So yes, identity, right? Yet the previous panel was so powerful in recognizing that, we're all divine creative beings, right? With women in particular, we have a vantage point and a vision and an eye for seeing multiple things, right? And for looking at, let me say this, for looking at situations and things more holistically. And so with having a more holistic vantage point and tapping into our creativity in that way, it definitely supports, who we are, right? And the energies that we draw into our experience. And so with having that heightened level of identity, it's super very important to nourish our health and to think about, what does it take to operate at that at those levels, right? So we think about like, are we getting enough rest? Are we drinking enough water? Are we eating? Or are we, typically as women, we just go, solutions. And oftentimes we find ourselves neglecting our health and well-being. And that kind of becomes a part of our identity as well. And so I really thank you for bringing that conversation or bringing that to the forefront.
Yes, and just to scratch a layer and going a little bit deeper and dragging confidence into this thread, how does confidence have to do with physical well-being, especially for women? What do you have to say on that?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is unfortunately or fortunately, or it's just the time that we're living in as being in this historical patriarchal timeline that we're in presently. And with the GatherVerse community, I appreciate again this platform and this space for recognizing that we are at a shift right now when it comes to the energies and the vibrations that are being pulled forth. And it coming from a more feminine, it's calling out for more feminine centered energy to be present, right? And so that gives the opportunity for greater confidence and greater appreciation, I should say, too,
Yes.
of femininity, more women-centered approaches to things, particularly in the business realm as technologies are being developed and created. And so back to your initial question of identity, right? Women, we